It all started after the Second World War. 1948, UK government invited its colonies, British Empire, to help its disjointed cities to be rebuilt. Then immigrants arrived in Tilbury Docks. 2 decades later, 1971, UK government loosened the immigration law and gave the immigrants an indefinite leave to remain. Without a clear documents, the government just told them directly. 70 years later, 2018, UK government tightened the immigration law, and now they need a real documents, a real evidence about the status of their citizenship. However, because there are no clear documents given in the past, they need to make it at that time or got deported back to its original country.
Scandal. Both the Home Secretary and the previous Home Secretary, Theresa May, having to defend their hostile environment policy. Imagine that being a fucking policy. Sorry.
To see how this happened, let's go back to 1948.
In 1948, Britain made a promise. They declared that every person across Commonwealth, from Jamaica to India, from Barbados to Trinidad, was a British subject, not a guest, not a migrant, a citizen with full rights to enter, work, and live in the United Kingdom. And people came. Between 1948 and 1973, roughly 500,000 Caribbean men and women boarded ships to enter Britain's call. They staffed the National Health Services, nearly 40% of NHS workers in that era. They taught in schools, drove the buses, run local governments. They didn't come to take, they came to build. Then, in 1971, the government offered something that's called indefinite leave to remain, or the ILR, to those who already settled in the UK. At first, it sounded like security, but here's what ILR actually meant in practice. There is no ID card, no physical certificate, no central database. For many, the only proof wasn't stamped in an old passport, one that might have been damaged, lost, or never even existed because thousands had arrived as children under their parents' documents. Whether by design or negligence, the government built a system with no paper trail, and that choice, intentional or not, would later be weaponized decades later. And so, the Windows generation, British people who had lived for 40, even 50 years, suddenly found themselves locked out, fired from jobs they held for years, evicted from landlords too afraid to raise a fine, denied from cancer treatments, detained in immigration centers. Some were deported, sent to Caribbean countries where they have no home, no family, sometimes even no memory. Fast forward to 2010, Theresa May became Home Secretary. She launches what she herself called the hostile environment policy. Her words, "The aim is to create here in Britain a really hostile environment for illegal migration." The mechanism itself was clever and brutal. Rather than relying on border agents, the government deputized private citizens and institutions to do the checking. Landlords were now required to verify immigration status before renting, or face a £5,000 fine. Employers had to check before hiring, and the NHS have to check before treating, banks before opening accounts, and the DVLA before issuing a driver license. On paper, this targeted immigrants. In practice, it targeted anyone who looked like an immigrant. When Amber Rudd replaced May at the Home Office, she claimed she didn't know the scale of what was happening. She resigned in April 2018 after it emerged she had, in the Parliament words, inevitably misled about MPs about internal deportation targets. The key point here is that the hostile environment policy implicitly promotes discrimination. It doesn't distinguish between legal and illegal. It worked on appearance, Caribbean names, black skin. The Windows generation fits the profile perfectly. In 2018, the stories broke publicly. The Guardian and BBC began running individual cases. People like Sylvester Marshall, a cancer patient denied NHS treatment, Albert Thompson detained and unable to access prostate cancer care. These weren't edge cases. NGOs like Praxis had been tracking a quiet pattern for months. People systematically locked out of employment, housing, benefits, and healthcare, not only because they were illegal, but because they couldn't prove they weren't. Jeremy Corbyn raised the issue at Prime Minister's questions twice. On April 16th, Theresa May, now Prime Minister, offered a public apology at the Commonwealth Leaders Summit. By May, the government launched the Windrush Scheme, a task force to help affected people opt in documentation free of charge.
Has always been their home, makes the treatment which some members of the Windrush generation experienced in recent years so very wrong. It should never have happened, and we are putting it right, by helping people who want to obtain documentation to do so quickly and free of charge, and by ensuring that anyone from the Windrush generation who wants to become a British citizen can do so, simply and at no cost.
As late 2023, the scheme had helped 16,895 people to get their documents, Jamaicans around 3,508, India 2,509, various Caribbean nations thousands more. But here's the gap that defies the scandal's real scale. Praxis estimates a minimum of 57,500 people were affected. The task force reached barely 16,000. In the words of one analyst, they had barely scratched the surface. The Windrush scandal isn't a story about immigration gone wrong. It is a story about government that invited people in, stripped away the proof of their belonging, and then used the absence of proof against them. The question worth sitting isn't just how did this happen, it's who is served from this system and who is erased.
With all of these shenanigans throughout the Windrush generation activity, we've seen a lot of characters inside throughout the scandal. There are two types, which is the actors and also the stakeholders. The UK government is known as the most prestigious thing in UK. However, the cabinet changes periodically that gives different administrative throughout the decades, where in the past they give full rights to the immigrants to be considered as their citizen of the UK, become part of their labor and having a life there. Everything was chill, fine and happy. However, as time goes by, the UK government changed their cabinet and their newest leaders trying to make the UK shine brighter by giving more restriction to their citizens, including the immigrants, even a pressure to them with no documentation of their living as the native and also citizens at UK. They're being threatened by the governance. This shows how inconsistent and how unreliable the government is, because they only wanted restriction, rules and power given by the hard and soft power. Let me introduce you to the employers, the landlords, and the National Health and Services. First of all, the employers. In British, they need lots and tons of labor, especially after the crisis. So they need to get more labor, especially from the immigrants. The employers are forced to give up the immigrants as their labor. They fire them and also give more confinement to them. We also have the landlords and also the National Health and Service, or NHS. They make them to forcibly giving up to the immigrants also by not giving them the lands anymore and not having the rent, and also they limited their services for healthcare. They are the one who runs the whole UK big wheel, or what we call the economy and also opportunities inside the UK. They help them to shine bright by just their cooperation and also in their community being solid as key. However, as time goes by, the government threatened them to make them leave. The people, of course, do not just stand there. They're standing and also giving their voices. They voices them. They're the one who protests and also maintain organization inside the UK. Eventually, this become the national crisis. And they are not being heard by the government, and soon they're deported by them. So they intend to have limited powers
from themselves, even when they have the voices vox populi. They're easy to break, and they're mostly reactive. They're all the one that gives the voices the essence of fighting the government. This whole thing started from, of course, the spread of voices and also information throughout the decades and throughout the era. Soon this comes to the ear of the journalists. They try to find and investigate some of the stories and finding the real truth. And then they spread it. Public start to know. The pressure is hard. The media is influential. So let's actually know who are these actors and the stakeholders.
In March 2020, Wendy Williams published the Windrush Lessons Learned Review with the recommendations. Her finding was explicit. The Home Office suffered from institutional ignorance and thoughtlessness towards race. Because of this, the institution cannot be trusted to reform itself. But instead, the government did exactly that. By 2022, 21 recommendations were reported as met, but the most consequential were abandoned. As a result, there was no independent watchdog, no public reconciliation, and no external scrutiny. By then, in June 2023, Suella Braverman disbanded the Windrush unit entirely. Therefore, the structure that created the crisis remained intact, only without even the pretense of oversight. Compensation scheme opened in April 2019, and because the Home Office managed it, the same institution that created the crisis judged its own guilt. Consequently, the results were predictable. Of 9,848 claims, 5,373 eligible applicants were given zero entitlement. This means 64% were told they had suffered no loss. Furthermore, 53 claimants died while waiting. Fitzroy Maynard, who was made homeless by the hostile environment, stated that every request for evidence forced him to relive his trauma. Hence, this scheme did not provide justice. Instead, it extended the harm.
It's hard going. Very hard going.
Because the critical recommendations were abandoned in 2023, there was no mechanism left to prevent recurrence. Moreover, the media and public had moved on by 2024. In the end, the hostile environment remained intact. The deputized gatekeepers continued operating, and the institution faced no consequence. Thus, nothing fundamental changed. The only thing that ended was the coverage. Yet, the Home Office is still in charge.
The actors of this scandal is the government as the main executor. The stakeholder is the citizens or the immigrants that have stayed long in this country. As a result, they produce an inequality. Some of them lose their jobs, houses, and even a detention. Ultimately, the Windrush generation scandal demonstrates how changes in policy can transform inclusion into inequality.